expand the slides. Alright, let's see if we can get that full screen. Yeah, of course. Give me 1 more second. There we go. Let's make sure Panopto is still with us. Of course it's not. Yes, it is. Okay. Let's cross finger. That should be working, at least for a few minutes. All right. So, as you can guess, we're going to record the lecture. Sorry, we're going to try to make a live video this semester so that I can propagate it on Panopto, have everyone have access. That's my current workaround right now. If I come up with something better, I will try to implement it. My main concern is audio. Audio meaning that this thing, I tested it, it's working. A lapel mic is okay. It's not probably the best way to record audio in a live setting, but we're going to try to make it work. If you have questions during the session, I would love for this recording to not affect negatively your ability to ask questions, okay? We are going to check how the audio level works, but my guess is that this thing is not going to pick up anybody asking a question in the classroom. So I will repeat the question to make sure I understand you and to make sure that they go in the recording for those of us that are going to watch that afterward. But please do not hesitate to ask questions and interrupt, okay? It's not a formal recording. It's nothing. It's just something to allow us to have a backup plan if somebody cannot attend or is quarantined or something like that, okay? All right. So as usual, we warm up with a few public service announcements. One student asked me if I could make available the COP2513 material, the prerequisite to this class, okay? I have absolutely no problem with that. So since I cannot enroll you into a class that is actually completed, what I did instead is I duplicated it on Canvas. So we have now something called self-study-COP2512, which has been cleaned, sanitized, so there's no personal information on that stuff. And I can grant you access if you are interested, okay? So the one student that was interested has actually already been granted access. I'm waiting to see, what breaks, what doesn't work, etc. I'm always optimistic like that. But if any of you want to have access to the material that I use, with my students during COP2512, please drop a Canvas message to any of the TA. Any of the TA will do. They have been added already. They should be able to add you should you want to have access to that course, okay? What else? Videos might be back, so I already explained that. We're going to see how this turns out, hopefully well. The IE0, so I set a tentative date for now, which is not this upcoming Monday, but the following Monday. I say tentative, but I'm pretty sure this is going to be the date that we stick around with. By the end of the week, if there is a change, I will post an announcement in Canvas. So right now, my plan is to make the IE0 available on that day in a time window. So anything between 9 a.m. to 11:59 p.m. So the duration is 2 hours. Of course, you know the drill. That means that you have to start before 10 p.m. Okay, 11:59 p.m. is when we have the cutoff deadline for submitting a completed IE0 in Canvas. So I've been already going over the rules. One attempt only, but there are multiple attempts allowed in case you get disconnected. If you get disconnected, Canvas message me, copy all of the TA. After you're done with the exam, explain what happened. So do you give us a heads up? We are not going to just see red flags coming out of honor lock, okay? And we're going to talk a little bit more today about the structure of the exam. How many of you already took a look? Not at the exam itself, at the mock IE, sorry, I should have clarified. 1, that's it, 2, 3, okay, 4, all right, 5, 6 maybe. All right, we're going to take a quick look because there are a few things that I want to explain in the structure of that exam that are going to kind of serve as a stepping stone for multidimensional arrays. So we are going to do that today, but basically what you are going to have to do in this exam, you're going to have to write a bunch of static methods in a class. So static methods are what we have been using exclusively during COP2512, okay? In this course, we are going to use both static and non-static method. The thing you need to know, I would really recommend, you need to know basic Java syntax, okay? If, loops, etc. Of course, the primitive data types, some of the reference data types. The two reference data types that are the most important maybe for IE0 for you to brush up on right now are string and arrays. Array is also a reference data type. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. So my plan is today we look at the mock IE. I try to use it to fill in all the gaps about two-dimensional arrays. After that, I have some more material ready for us to look at actually what has been a source of question in the previous semesters, namely methods, references, and two-dimensional arrays. Somebody pointed out to me, by the way, that if you took COP2512 with me, the two-dimensional array module was the very, very last module of the semester, which means that actually what we did is we didn't even have a mandatory reading assignment. I just did 1 or 2 sessions, I don't remember, that were a summary of that chapter, okay? So that material on two-dimensional arrays is going to be good for everybody, even if you took the class with me and we had this little summary, because we are going to try to go a little bit more in depth, okay? For the IE itself, for IE0, I am not going to try to trick you with two-dimensional arrays, but the code I'm going to give you will use two-dimensional arrays. And I'll explain exactly what I mean during the session, okay? Can I consult whatever, XYZ, during the exam? The answer generally is no. The only thing that are allowed during the final exam and our intermediary exams are the textbook, digital or print, okay? And then an IDE. JGrasp recommended, but if you are using IntelliJ IDE, Visual Studio Code, whatever, that's fine. This is what you're going to use to modify the code that you download from the exam and then upload it again. All right? That's it. Everything else is no-go. For example, commonly asked question, can I have, the exercise that I wrote up to now in the semester? No. Because that would be like encouraging, cut and paste oriented programming, and I'm going to find an exercise that looks like the exam, and that's going to give me quote-unquote inspiration. We are trying to make sure that you can write code from scratch if you have to. From scratch doesn't mean that you have to memorize all the little tiny details. That's why you have an open textbook exam. Okay. Plus you have an IDE that where your compiler is going to tell you if you forgot a parameter, an argument, a semicolon, and so on and so forth. Okay. So that should be enough safety net. But now we want to really assess that you can use those tools, and including those safety nets, to write code from scratch. All right. So we talked about level 1, level 2, right? So level 1 was I give you the description of what the program needs to do. I give you exactly step by step how it's going to do it, and then you code it into Java. So pretty much translation. Level 2 is, I don't have those step by step instruction, even in English, because I don't know how computers work. So I'm still going to tell you how I want the program to work, and then I'm going to give you a milestone per milestone decomposition of how to get to that end result. And that's kind of a scaffold, right? And then we are level 3 now, so no scaffold, no pseudocode. I tell you what I want, and I really don't know anything about programming or computer. You are the expert. You decide, how you are going to go about implementing the product that I described to you. So this is a real thing, pretty much. So to try to give you both an idea of what the description of this kind of assignment look like, hint, you can take any exercise in the textbook. Just pick randomly one exercise in the textbook. This is level 3. Okay? They are all phrased without giving you those additional clues that we use at the beginning to kind of scaffold people into getting comfortable with programming. Okay? So I'm going to show you what this kind of exercise is going to look like when you go to the IE. I'm going to also use this as an opportunity to show you the decomposition into multiple files. This is something we started to do at the end of COP2512. Okay? We're going to do it during the entire semester. Until now, I've been using one Java file normally. I declare one class in one Java file, and that class just happens to be the class that features a main method, and everything is self-contained into that one file. To do object-oriented programming, we are going to try to tackle larger code bases, and we are going to inexorably span over multiple files. Okay? So we are going to start doing that right now, just to give you a taste of it and an idea of how that works in Java. So we have a little exercise here that I already mentioned at the end of the session yesterday. Not yesterday, I always say yesterday. At the end of the session, last session, pretty much. This is just an excuse, right? The methods themselves are not that complicated. The last one may be a little bit tricky. Not really tricky, but there's a trick to it. Let me rephrase that way. The methods are not complicated, but I want to get you used once again to the format of things. So on Canvas, we have actually a starter template for this little exercise. So the starter template is going to look something like this. So this is already on Canvas. You can download it. And I suggest that you download it. You do exactly what I'm going to do right now, which is rename it date translation. We don't need the starter. Save it. When you try to save, JGraphs is going to tell you, wait a minute, the name of the class no longer matches the name of the file that you are using. Do you want me to rename and save? Yes, rename and save, and now I'm ready to compile. Otherwise, I would get compilation errors. Okay, if the name of the class doesn't match the name of the file, you get the compiler mad. All right, what do we have inside? So as the slide was explaining, I'm not going to go back and forth with the slide. I'm just going to explain to you as we look at the code. As the slide was detailing, we want to write one method inside a class named date translation. So here's my public class date translation, and here is the one method I want to write. In every IE, every final exam that you take with me, I'm going to give you some code like this, except that this one has been hastily put together. There's no comments, okay? When I give an exam, when I give a final exam, there are a lot of comments that explain exactly what I want you to write. But what you can see already here is just the code part of things, right? I have a method. It corresponds to the method that was described in the requirement, okay? So it's a public method. It's a static method, which means we can call it directly with the name of the class. The name of the method is format date. It takes 3 parameters. The first one is the day, the number of the day. So that's going to be the number of the day in the month. The second one is the number of the day in the week. 1 is for Monday, and so on and so forth. The third one is the number of the month. 1 is for January, and so on and so forth. 12 is for December, okay? And what we want to return, so we say here before the name of the method, we declare what kind of data the method will return. What is the data type of the returned value? And if you don't want to return any value from a method, we talked about that already, you just put the keyword void here. In this case, we are going to return something. The whole point of the method is that I call you with those 3 arguments, you give me something back. And the something back in this case is going to be a string, so some text that's going to read like a human readable version of a date. So for example, Monday, comma, the 3rd of September, something like that, okay? All right, and then the requirement went a little further. So this is the method I want to use. When I say I want to use, that means that I'm writing this class only for the purpose of sharing and reusing my code. I'm going to have a class named date translation, and inside of it, I'm going to put pretty much over time all of my methods that have to do with date manipulation and stuff like that. All the little utilities that I develop, when I need something related to date. And I want to be able to put them all there so that I can easily create a new project, start a new app, and say pretty much the equivalent of I want to import, date translation. And now I'm going to be able to access all of those methods that I wrote inside date translation. For us, the import is going to be simplified. And I'm going to put a disclaimer here up front. In my courses, I do not focus on Java packages. Okay, Java packages, you can think of packages as a folder that contains Java source files. As long as the files are all in the same folder, we don't care about packages. So we don't care about doing import. So that means that if I have an app that is made of 5 different files, as long as they are all here in the folder where I have my JGraph open, I just have to compile each of them. And then I go to the one that has a main method. I hit Control-R or click the Running Man icon, and I get it to run. I get actually the entire application to run. Okay? So it takes all of the files that have been compiled, put them together, generates pretty much equivalent of an executable, and run it for me. All right? So because of that, that's what we are going to do this semester. If you are curious about package, come and see me during office hours. I'll give you the full story. But that will prevent us from having to do things like import, from having to worry about where on the hard drive things are located, and translate that into a proper import statement. Instead, we have one folder per project or something like that, or even worse, one folder for all the files for the semester, and then we just work with that. Okay? But it makes our life easier, and it's not something tremendously important at our level, and it's not something that's difficult to learn when you need to finally bite the bullet and organize your code properly with packages. Okay? So one of the methods I want to be able to reuse like this, obviously, is this one. This one does the entire job, right? But the requirement also tell me, well, while you're at it, you should write a method format month, and a method format weekday, and a method format day. And these are going to kind of do a part of the job of the method that I described first. So format month, you take a number. That number is an int. It's going to be the number of a month in the year, 1 to 12. You return a string that spells out the name of the month. That's it. For same thing for the weekday. You give me a number between 1 and 7. So we are going to have some convention, okay? Yes, we start at 1. We don't start at 0. And we start with Monday as being day number 1 and Sunday being day number 7. It doesn't matter which convention you prefer as long as we all agree on them, okay? And you return to me a string that spells out the name of that day. And then for format day, we want to do, this is the one that is a little bit more tricky, okay? We want somebody to be able to pass to us a date, like for example today, let's say it's the 21st, you pass to me 21. And what I'm going to return to you is a string with 2, 1, ST inside of it, 21st. So obviously, depending on what is the last digit, right, you have to add an ST, an ND, and so on and so forth. So if some of you are bored, this is a nice little trick to just refresh yourself maybe on modulo operator or something like that. There are a ton of different ways to do it. The one way to do it that I would not recommend is look at every possible value for the parameter, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 31, and in each case return a different string, because that's a lot of work for the programmer, a lot of typing, and it's not the best solution, it's not the smartest solution. So try to do something a little better there, okay? But the funny thing is that we can work on all of this little piece by little piece, and this is why I use this format in exam, okay? Meaning that you can start actually working, for example, on format month. Then you can work on format weekday, and if format day doesn't work the way you want, at the very least, what you could return to me is, we're going to start with this one. What you could return to me is a concatenation of an empty string plus the integer that was passed as parameter. So we are not going to look at, whether the February has 29 days or 28 days, things like that. We're not going to care about that. This is just for practice, okay? But in this case, what I care about, on the other hand, is this little piece of code here, very simple. It's going to return to me a string that contains a number that I gave as a parameter. How does that work? We use the plus operator. It doesn't mean addition. It means string concatenation. The plus operator, Java sees that you have on the left-hand side an operand of data type string. That's an empty string that we have here. On the right-hand side, you have an operand of data type int. That's a variable value. What happens when you try to apply the operator plus to two operands that have a different data type, and more specifically the data type that I just described? Well, Java is going to understand that you are trying to concatenate something, to append something to the string. So it's not going to modify the string. We're going to talk about that a lot more this semester. It's a topic called immutability of some objects. It's not going to try to modify this empty string here and insert something inside of it. No. It's going to take the value of the empty string. It's going to take the numerical value inside the parameter value. It's going to upgrade, in a manner of speaking, that numerical value from the data type int to the data type string. So it's going to, if I pass the value 21, it's going to convert my 21, which is just an int, an integer, into double quote 21 double quote, which is a string containing 21. Slap that together with an empty string, so it's not going to change. The end result is still double quote 21 double quote, and return that as a value. Okay. So it returns an entirely new string that has been composed by pretty much transforming the value into its representation as a string. So why do we care about that empty string? Why can't I just do something like this, return value directly? Any idea? Yeah?
It doesn't know where, like, to go in.
It doesn't know what?
Like, type it in the number. I guess the compiler doesn't know where to start from.
Well, it knows that it has an int here that's passed as parameter, right? So the question is more, why is it that we have to go and do something that looks a little overcomplicated here?
So the return type is the value string declared in the method.
So the return type is declared as string. So if I try to return a value, the compiler is going to complain saying that I'm trying to return an int, whereas I expect a string. So the whole point of this little workaround here, causing this conversion of the int to string, the whole point is it's happening only because I'm trying to concatenate to a string. Does it matter that the string is empty? No, there could be stuff in it. As soon as I try to concatenate an int to a string, the int is going to be converted into a string and put at the end of the other string, right? But in my case, I don't want gibberish here. So that's why I use an empty string. So it's kind of like a workaround. There are other ways we could have done that, okay? This is the one that I generally use in COP2513 because it allows us to discuss a little bit about type conversion. The fact that Java, sometimes when it tries to evaluate some expression, it's going to see things of different data type and it's going to try to match them up pretty much, okay? This is a topic we're going to talk a lot more about this semester as well, okay? So keep that in mind. I wanted to put it on your radar early on. So we have this format day version. It doesn't do really the job that I described, okay? It's not going to add st, nd, th, rd, all of those suffixes, after the number, but it's still going to give me something that's somewhat readable. So you know what? I already compiled it, made sure it was compiling, and I'm going to run it. But if I try to run it, this is what JGrass tells me. You do not have a main method. That's why in the requirement, you were asked to create another class. So that other class, we're going to create it together right now. Actually, you are asked to create two other classes, but I'm going to kind of merge them to save us a little bit of time, okay? Public static, no, public class. And I'm going to call it date translation test. So the purpose of the class date translation test, let me make sure that you have the big picture, okay, is to allow me, the programmer who is writing the other class, date translation, to make sure that my code is not total garbage, okay? So imagine that you ask me to write date translation for you, all right? I'm on it, I'm working on it, and only thing I'm going to give to you probably is date translation.java. Because that's the result. That's what you ask for. But I'm not going to give you a file, especially if you sign my paycheck. I'm not going to give you a file before I make sure that the methods in there that I wrote are all fully operational and compliant with the requirements. So this is why I add another class here. The purpose of that class is just to host public static void main, which is a main method, right? So this one is going to be something that we can execute. And it's going to do what in the main? It's just going to do calling of the method that I wrote in the other class and making sure that they work. So for example, I could say here, I'm going to call date translation. So we are writing static methods. That's why I can use the name of the class as a prefix before the method, like system.out.println, okay? And I can use the name of the class as a prefix here to invoke the method. So here, date translation, well, the only method that I wrote so far is format day. I didn't really kill myself trying to do a good job at it, but it's still there and working, supposedly compiling at least. And I'm going to say, if I'm going to pass 21. This is supposed to return to me a string that I'm going to call message Okay, message to display. So message originally is an empty string. Then I say, okay, now let's set message to whatever string this is returning. And then system.out.println. The result is, and then I'm going to display. So I'm going to concatenate to that string, the string inside MSG. That's it. It's a little bit of code that's going to allow me to run something finally. Okay, to run something, test it, see if it's working. The requirement asks you to make it interactive, which means that you would write like a loop that say, please give me a number, and then you would call date translation.format day, and then you would display, this is the result that the method returned. Later, when I want to test not only date translation.format day, but maybe date translation.format weekday, okay, I'm going to add more code. I'm going to ask you to enter another value, and I'm going to feed it to that other method, display the result. Here, I'm not making it interactive. I'll leave that as an exercise. It's trivial. We've done it in the previous lecture, right? This kind of stuff. But I want to focus on, what we are trying to do here is assess that the other methods are working. And we do it by visual inspection. So we are kind of halfway there toward automation. On one hand, I don't have to type in numbers anymore. I just call the method directly with a number here, all right? And then, so that's cool. I don't have to do that. But I still have to visually inspect the result and determine whether this is actually what I expected or not. So let's try to compile this. So I didn't give a name to the file, so it's going to, by default, offer to get the same name here. And it exists. We're going to save over. There we go. And then I'm going to, so every time you have a multi-file project like this, okay, what I advise you to do, if you are using a professional ID, you don't have to worry about that. But what I advise you to do with JGrasp is you go through all of your Java files every time. It takes only 3 seconds, okay? We don't have that many. Control B, compile. If it doesn't compile, stop, fix it. Then go to the next one, Control B. It compiles. If it doesn't compile, fix it. Watch out. If you do Control B, Control B, Control B, Control B on all of your files, but you don't care, if the compiler is yelling in pain, what's going to happen is that some of the files are not going to get compiled. Compiling a Java file turns it into a .class file, generates, I should say, a .class file. So that's the version of the source code that has been compiled. My folder is full of .class files right now. If I made a mistake in a file and I try to compile it and it failed, what would happen? Well, JGrasp doesn't clean up the old .class files. So that means that if I compile my code this morning at 9 a.m., I get my .class file for that Java source code file, okay? And then at 10 a.m., I'm done implementing my majestic syntax error, and I try to compile the file again, and now it tells me, no, I cannot compile. If I move forward ignoring that, and I try to run the whole thing, when I try to run the whole thing, Java is going to piece together all of the .class files that correspond to each of the source files. And hey, if it finds one, for that one source file that doesn't compile anymore, that's dated 9 a.m., it doesn't care. It's going to use it. And then, this is nice, okay? Because now you are making changes to your file. You are running the code. It still doesn't work. So you make another change. You run the code. It still doesn't work. Yeah, now you're wondering what's going on. So you try to make a random change. You compile everything, run the code. It still doesn't work. It still behaves the same way. The behavior is not changing. So you blow a fuse, and you go inside and you say system.out.println, what's happening? You just want to see something happen on the screen that is different from what you had before. You compile, you run, and that message doesn't even show up. Why? Because all along, the compilation failed. So it's not the latest version of the code that you were embedding together to form your app. It's the last version that pretty much compiled right. Okay? So watch out about that. That's a nasty little bug. Generally, at least a few students fall prey to that, but hopefully, if you are going to fall prey to that, you fall prey to that during office hours with a TA or with myself to help you, as opposed to, discover that kind of nice little thing during an exam, a timed exam. So here, everything compiles, so we don't have to worry about that. I try to run this, and this is what it's going to tell me on the screen. It's going to show me the result is 21. So yeah, I skipped the part about ST, etc., but at least what? At least I can get partial credit, which is not nothing. And also, it still compiles, and it's functional. I got a little closer to my goal. I didn't reach my full goal, but I got a little closer to my goal, and I can use that. I can work with that, okay? Meaning that now I can go back to this file, and I can say, you know what? I don't know how to do this formatting that I'm being asked to do, but I'm going to leave it at that for now, and I'm going to start working on, for example, format weekday, because I think that this one, I can get it done completely. And that's exactly what you're going to do in your exams, right? So, string day equal nothing. Not nothing, actually. Empty string. There is a difference between an empty string and a null string. What's a null string? What's an empty string? So, an empty string is exactly what I showed you here. Double quote, no space, no nothing, double quote. Okay? So, this is actually a string. If I sell you a novel, it has a cover page, a back cover, right? But there is only a single page that is blank inside of it. You're probably not going to be really happy by your purchase, but at least it's still something. I gave you something that is empty, an empty box, an empty novel, a blank sheet of paper, right? That's what an empty string is. A null string is when we would write here null. And as you can see by the coloration from JGrasp, null is actually a keyword. It's a keyword from the Java language. Any reference variable, okay, any variable of a reference data type can accept actually to be assigned the null value. It's a way to say the address at which you are going to find the object that I'm referring to is 0, nada, null. Okay? So when you say that, that means I have a reference variable. It's supposed to refer to an object, but you know what? The object has not yet been created. Or, you know, I'm trying to refer to the object that has this and that quality in a set of objects, but you know I have not chosen yet. So for now, I point to null. I point to 0. Okay? So that's something that we are going to encounter very frequently. In last semester, we kind of worked this progressively in. This semester, we're going to use it a lot. Okay? So there is a difference between a null string and just an empty string. Here, the variable day refers to an actual string object that contains no text. But it's still a string object. It still exists. All right. And now what I want to do is I want to look at the value. And based on the value, I want to be able to return pretty much something that is a fully spelled out day of the week, right? So how could I do this? I could say if value equal 1, then I'm going to say day equal Monday, else, and there we go. If value equal 2, then day equal Tuesday. If you think this is fun, wait that I get to the months. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. We're going to stop here, okay? All right. So I could go about it this way. This is perfectly fine. This is functional. If you are not sure even that you are doing the right thing, why complicate your life? You know how if statement works. Just use a if, else statement. You are going to get the job done, okay? Can I compile this? Yes. Can I run it? Well, I cannot run that file, but I can run the file that has a main method that uses it, except that it's not doing anything with format weekday. Okay? So what I want to do now is I want to call this method here, right here, and I want to do something like, for example, let me comment this out, and we are going to just cut and paste format weekday. And we're going to take some day in the middle of the week, so day number 3. So 1, 2, 3, that's going to be Wednesday. Yeah, question?
Don't you have to return day from the method?
Yes, I do have to return day. I didn't do that yet. Let me see. Yes, I still return, good catch. I still return the empty string here. So that means that no matter what I did, I'm going to say the day is empty string. So yeah, that's not going to be optimal. Let's replace that by day, so that once I have determined what day it is, I return it, and now we should get the value. Perfect, awesome. So here, I'll call format weekday, and then I'm just going to display the result is. So it's still semi-interactive. We're going to fix that later, okay? But for now, I'm going to compile this. So I compiled already date translation. I compiled this. It's working. Let's run it. The result is, well, it's because I was lazy, and after Monday, Tuesday, I stopped. So that means that I'm going to always display these and an ellipsis, every time I go past Tuesday. Okay, so let's fix that. What about I do this? Compile again. So I don't need to recompile date translation because I didn't change it. In the heat of the moment, wherever you are thinking about other things or you are stressed because of an exam, okay, I recommend that you always make sure everything is compiled to its latest version like so. Okay, and then now you can read it. You can run it, sorry. Result is Tuesday. So I can do my test like that a little bit more conveniently. What if, so there are so many different ways we can go from here. So I'm going to latch on this here as a remark. What if I don't like doing a bunch of if, else, if, else, if, else? What else can I use? Yeah? Switch, bingo. Anybody never heard of a switch statement? Just give me a quick sign. Okay? So the switch statement is not essential. Okay, first thing to know, like I just proved it to you. I can do the job with a if else. So the switch statement is what we call syntactical sugar. It's like the icing on the cake, right? It's like I'm going to use a different syntax just because the previous syntax I don't like it. And yes, it is a little subjective. Okay? So how does the switch statement work? I do switch. I specify here an expression that can be evaluated at compilation time. So, for example, that can be evaluated at runtime. So here the variable value is going to contain something when I run my code. Perfect. It has to be a scalar value. So I think about things like an int, a char, a boolean. Boolean would be a little weird, but I mean, an int and a char, definitely we can use them in a switch statement. And we have curly braces. And then instead of using else if, and so on and so forth, the syntax is different. We use the keyword case, and we say if value is equal to 1, so if this expression is equal to this value, then colon, this is what we do. And at the end of the work to be done, we use the break keyword. And then we do the same thing here. We say second case, if the value is 2, then we do this. And then again, at the end of a case, break. I'm not going to say what happens when you omit the break statement. At this point, if you don't remember or have never seen that, take a look at the chapter on conditional that I assigned as reading assignment. It's going to explain to you exactly what happens in the break, and then come to office hours with question. We'll help you out, okay? But the bottom line is that if I just want to use the break in the most easy manner, in the easiest manner, then this is how I would do it. And then there is a special case called default. This is what happens, if none of the previous case actually triggered. And for that one, I don't even need to put a break statement at the end. Okay? And this is going to do exactly the same job. Build it. So again, I'm going to be paranoid. So I'm going to say, I don't remember if I modified date translation. Well, that's the one I was modifying right now, though. But anyway, I'm going to compile it. I'm going to compile date translation test even though I didn't modify it, just to be sure. And then I'm going to run it again, and it's going to tell me the result is Tuesday. Now, this is, that would be nice if this was a question for a job interview. That would be very, very nice. Generally, they tend to be a lot more complicated than that. But let's say this is a question for my job interview. I want to impress people. So instead of writing, 16 line of switch statement, okay, 2 lines per day of the week plus the switch, the closing curly brace, and the default, so 17. Instead of doing that, I want to write code that is a little bit more terse. And I'm going to use arrays to do that. So how can I do this? Well, I could say, let me take a string here that I'm going to call days. And what I want it to be an array of strings. Okay? So an array means a sequence of elements of fixed size. All right? So, for example, 5 integers, 5 doubles, 5 strings. And each element has the same data type. And they are put in order and kept in order so that I can access each of them using what we call an index, starting at 0. So the first element of an array of 5 elements is at index 0. The last element, the fifth element of an array of 5 elements, is at index 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So we start counting at 0 when it comes to arrays. So here, I want to create an array. There's different way to create an array. Here I'm going to use this curly brace notation. We have been using curly braces almost everywhere already to delimitate the body of a loop, the body of a method, the body of a class, right? Here it's different. It's called an initialization block for arrays. So when you use the curly brace like that after the equal sign while you are declaring an array, that means that you're going to give me the list of the element that you want in that array. And Java will create the array, put the element inside of it, and then finally put the reference to that newly created array object inside the variable days. So for example, here I can say Monday, Tuesday, and I'm going to abbreviate Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. All right. So that creates my array. And right now, I'm just going to real quick, I'm going to remove this for now. Okay. So all of this is going to go bye-bye. And I just want to, for example, return the first element of that array. So I use a square bracket notation to index in an array. Same thing in Python, C++. So all of you have been exposed to that kind of notation. Control B, it compiles. Doesn't mean it runs. So now I'm going to test it again. Control B for the test file. Control R. Result is Monday. The first day is Monday. Awesome. That's working so far, except that maybe it's not Monday that I should be displaying. It's Tuesday. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use value as an index. But if I use value, we agreed, and it's not written anywhere, but it should be in the documentation or at least in the comments of the method. We agreed that Monday was 1, Tuesday was 2, and so on and so forth. So 1 to 7. My array has all the days. They are all there. Okay, no problem. But they start at index 0 to 6. So I need to do a little bit of conversion here. If you give me, I want day 1, I say 1 minus 1, 0. Okay, I give you the element index 0 in the array, the first element. If you want day 3, 3 minus 1, 2, I give you the element at index 2. And now it's going to make sense, right? Build, build that other file instead of building twice the same one. Result is Tuesday when I run it. Perfect. Okay? So that the whole point here was to draw your attention to the fact that we can create arrays like this. Okay? Alternatively, we could do things a little bit more complicated in a little bit more complicated way. We could say strings square bracket, which means an array of string, days equal new string array of 7 elements. Okay, and then I could say days index 0 equal Monday, and then days index 1. So I load the array with data here. Okay, and then, well, there's no real benefit then to do that because it's going to be as long as the original version. Yes, question?
Can you use that second notation when you just want to make an array without putting the actual you just want the indexes to be there but not have actual values in them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I should remember to repeat for the recording. The question was, you use that notation, that second notation that we have at line 15, whenever you want to create the array, but there's nothing in it. And yes, every element of the array, in this case, it's supposed to be a string. String is a reference data type. So what value do you put in a reference variable when you don't have an object to refer to? You put null. So I'm going to create the object that is an array. It's going to have all those slots, those 7 slots inside of it, but inside each of those 7 slots, I'm going to have the value null put automatically by Java because I don't know yet what I want to put in there. Okay, so you use the over notation, the block initialization for array with the curly brace, when you are about to create you are about to create an array, and you know already exactly what you want in it, and it's not going to change. Okay, it's going to be always this element, this element, this element, this element. So you know how many elements, you know what their value are supposed to be. You can use the block initialization syntax. Okay, otherwise, then we would have to write code like this that only when we know it, when we know what the day 0 should be, then we're going to put Monday. Okay. All right. So this one, yeah, not so good in this specific scenario. So I'm going to comment it out. Go back to the previous one that was much better. We are done with format week day. What about format month? I'm not going to go through it because it's exactly the same thing. Okay. So we just need to make an array of 12 elements because we have 12 months. And then we start loading it with January, February, March, April, May, etc., 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 and it's exactly the same structure. So right now, because I want to be able to test that, I'm going to do a dummy implementation. Okay, this is already a dummy implementation. I re-implement the dummy implementation into a dummier implementation. So instead of returning an empty string that I cannot see on the screen or something like that, I'm going to say every time you give me a number, I'm going to say month name. That's it. That's the name of the month. Okay, just because I don't want to spend the time to write it, during the live session. And then what about the whole thing, the whole shebang here, format date? So if I have those over method, it's going to be easy for me to kind of call them individually and piece together the result. Okay, so I could do something such as I want to start with, let's say I want to start with the weekday. Okay, so I have a parameter called p weekday, parameter weekday. Okay, I can pass that to the method format weekday. And that's going to return to me, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, etc. All right. So I take this. This is going to be a string. Once it's done executing, the result is going to be a string with the name of the day. I'm going to concatenate that and put a comma after it and a space. So Monday, comma, and I'm going to even say the, and now I want the number, the date. Okay. So the date is given to me as p day, parameter day. Again, I'm going to wrap this and pass it to the method format day. And it's supposed to return to me first, second, third, etc. It just returns to me the number. That's okay for now. The first, second, whatever, or 1, 2, 3, of, and then the name of the month, p month, format month. Okay, and I'm going to break this down so that it can stay on the screen for those of you who are coding along. So there we go. Here are all the concatenation that we are doing to form the result. And when I have this, and I could do it differently, right? I could call each method individually, save the result in a variable, then concatenate all those variables together. Here I'm just doing everything in one step. Okay, I call all of the method in that expression. All the results come in, I concatenate them together, and I return that directly. So it's a one-line method, pretty much. Build, it builds. I'm not testing it yet. So again, I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to say, comment this out, go to the end, and now I want to use date translation dot format date. Okay. Just making sure that this is the name of the method. Yep. And now I'm going to give it values, like for example 2, 3, 5, and see what it returns for me to display. So the result is Wednesday is a 2 of month name. I'm still kind of a way, kind of far from the end result that I wanted, but think about it. Everything structurally is there. The structure of my code is there. I know how to solve each of the problems. The only thing that I haven't done is put in the time and effort to do the 7 days instead of just doing 2 of them, and to do the 12 month instead of doing the magical month of month name only. Okay, that's it. So all the difficulties are solved. Why do I insist on that? Because this is what you need to do during an exam too, right? I mean, during an exam, you do want to finish, otherwise you're only going to get partial credit for each step, right? You do want to finish the 12 months. But forget a little bit about that for a second. From an intellectual point of view, once you have done 2 months, the rest is piece of cake. So you are going to do, as I did today, you are going to focus on getting, 2 months working. You're going to test them. And when it's working, don't waste your time typing like the 12 months. When it's working for January and February, add all the months, test again, make sure that January, December are reachable, for example, okay? And that's it. Then move on to the next feature, okay? So I'm trying to, at the same time that we do this together, trying to insist on what is a proper way. It's not proper. Proper is not the proper word for that. What is the good way to try to minimize the potential for bad news during the exam, okay? Or as you are working in a company developing code. All right. So what about those tests? Well, I could use arrays in my tests as well. I don't have to just, comment out the stuff I don't want anymore, add something else, put some values, hard-code it like that. I can still hard-code the values, but I can actually make it run like any values that are coming from an array. So I have an array of weekdays, for example, value, an array of day value, an array of month value, and every time I go in a loop and I say I'm going to take the first weekday, the first day value, the first month value, call it, and display it. Well, that's what we are going to see with the mock exam, okay? We're going to take a quick look at the end of the session. So we can use multi-dimensional array to do exactly that kind of stuff. For now, I'm going to leave that because it's illustrated in the mock exam, but what I would like to look at is this here. I don't want to have to inspect visually, especially if I'm going to add more and more tests into my main, right? I don't want to have to just look at the results scrolling and then, count, okay, the third line is the third test that I made, and it says the date is this. Go back to the source code. What is the third test? This was this number, this number, this number. Does that match? Yes? No? No, I don't want to have to do that job. So what I'm going to do is, when I do a test like that, I'm going to anticipate what I expect. Okay? So I would say, for example, observed result equal, and I'm going to declare this as a string as well. Observed result. Okay, so observed result is what did I get when I called the method. So I'm going to pretty much put it here instead of MSG. Okay, this is what I observe when I run my code with 2, 3, and 5 as parameter. But then I need something called expected result. Okay, and the expected result is what I would expect my program to do. So Wednesday, the 2nd of May. Sorry, I had to go French for a second there. I don't know why, but that's just how it works. All right, string expected result equal nothing at the beginning. Okay, so now I'm going to leave it there for those who download the file after the fact. So now I have both a string that represents what my code is doing and a string that I wrote myself based on looking at 2, 3, 5 and figuring out what I wanted that represent pretty much what I expect the code to do. And now I can do something such as if observed result dot equals. So this is something that you need to know from the chapter on string, okay, in the textbook. Very important. Just know the catalog of available methods on the string data type. So you can test if they are equal. You can test if a string contains another substring and stuff like that, okay? And then you can always look up the definition. But I recommend you do also 1 or 2 quick exercises here to practice. So observe result dot equals, and I'm going to put expected result. So if the 2 strings are the same, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to system.out println, and I'm going to say that the test was successful. So there you go. Shiny, the test worked. Else, we had a problem. So the test failed. All right. Build. No syntax error, it builds. I'm going to rebuild both files actually to make sure I have the latest version. There we go. Now go back to the one that has the main, and I'm going to run it. And it tells me nope, because of course I am not yet there. And my test is failing, which means I have some more work to do. So I go back to the drawing board and I say, okay, it's kind of working. I can add here, a display that says this is what I got, okay? So that I don't just get failure as a result, but I get also some details about what happened exactly. So in this case, I can do display observed result, for example. There we go. And that's it. So now when it fails, no, wait a minute. I put it on the wrong spot, of course. When it fails, I want it to tell me exactly why it failed. Okay, so I'm going to add this here. There we go. Run. And now I can compare. So I inspect visually only the ones that failed, and I use that as my next goal. My next goal is to fix, for example, well, the second, I still don't know how to do that, but off month name, yeah, I was a little lazy, so I'm going to go ahead and finish up the code that is supposed to tell me pretty much the name of each of the months. Okay? All right, and that's it. So that technique, you are going to see it again in our mock IE. Okay, so if I go to the next slide after this, the mock IE is also a level 3 exercise. This one is really trivial, even simpler than the one that we just looked at, by far simpler actually. So if you want something easy to start off with, take a look at the mock IE. Okay, the idea here is that you are going to have kind of the same structure, very, very, very similar, meaning that there's going to be somewhere a method that you have to write, and in a main method somewhere else, there's going to be some code that's going to test that method. For the sake of simplicity, for IE0, it's going to be one class. So I ask you to write one class. I tell you in that class I want to see this method, so one method. You have to write it. And then I provide you with a main method that assumes that that other method is returned, calls it, and try to run it through a bunch of tests. But we do that a little bit differently. We do that kind of a little bit better, maybe, than what I showed you. So this is a mock IE question1.java file. It's uploaded on Canvas, so I really recommend that you take a look at it before, IE0. You are asked to write the content of the method named biggest. It takes two parameters, x and y, both int, and it's going to return to me an int value, which is the biggest of the two. Pretty explicit, self-explanatory. Right now, my dummy implementation returns always 0. So it's not doing much, okay? And then, after that method biggest that you have to write, here comes the main method. But it's already written. It's already written, it's given to you when you download the file from the exam, and it has a bunch of stuff in it that does what? Testing. So let's take a look at the output before we go into the detail of how the code does the testing. Okay? If I compile this, so I have only one file, so I don't have to worry about compiling multiple files. If I compile this and run it, this is what the main does for me. It's going to say, I'm testing your method. There's only one method, so I don't even have to put the name, right? I'm testing your method. Test number 0. With the parameters 10 and 20, your method failed. Test number 1 with parameters 20 and 10 failed. So it doesn't tell me what the method returned. But assuming that you don't return garbage, which I am doing at the moment, I return 0 every time, right? But assuming you don't return garbage, that just means you return the wrong parameter out of the two, okay? Or, like I said, you just return 0 or minus 99 all the time, or a randomly generated number. I don't know what you're doing, but you're doing it wrong. So that is going to tell you all the tests that fail. And then if a test happens to succeed, it's going to tell you, well, when I call your method with, for example, here, 0 and 0, your method did a good job. So it's kind of like an analog watch that is stuck. It's still right twice a day, technically speaking, okay? Doesn't have much value, but it's still right twice a day. So those dummy implementation that I give you during the exams, Occasionally, they're going to succeed partially. It's just because, returning 0 all the time, you may have the luck that, you're right once in a while. That's it. But that doesn't mean much, right? If I read those results, it's telling me when both parameters are the same, first thing, 0 and 0 are the same, and equal to 0, then it looks like it's working. But anything else, it's not working. And if I was curious, I would be probably tinkering a little bit with that and saying, what if I have 0 and 10? What if I have 0 and minus 10? Does it work? Doesn't it work? So I want you to be able to add more tests if you think of tests that are relevant. The goal is we don't give you the test, meaning that this is an exhaustive, universal list of all the tests that can be possibly run on your code. We just give you a sample to help you debug while you are implementing your method, right? But at the end of the day, you may want to add some tests just to make sure that you avoid some bugs that you took into consideration, stuff like that. So to do that, you need to understand the code in the main, be able to modify it, okay? Doesn't mean it's not the same as me expecting you to write this code, without any form of help or scaffolding or whatsoever. No, that just means that you need to understand when it's already written for you so that you may actually adapt it to your needs. So let's take a look here. Int square bracket parameters equals, well, it looks like we are dealing with arrays, okay, first thing. So parameters is a variable that's going to be an array, apparently. And it looks like we're using the curly brace notation to initialize, but there is some added stuff. If I add a one-dimensional array, okay, if I had a one-dimensional array, I could declare and initialize it like so. That's the syntax we just talked about, okay? What did I do here? I added an extra set of empty square bracket here. So that means that when I have only int, the way that I read this is that I say x, I declare x, variable x, of data type int. When I use this notation here, the way I read it is I say I declare variable data of data type array of int. You read right to left, if you will, okay? Data is an array of int. Data, empty square bracket, int. And here, parameters, I declare the variable parameters that is an array of int. So what is an array of int? It's an array where each element is itself an entire array. And those arrays, the element inside of them are int. So it's a matrix. It's a two-dimensional array. Okay, but the way that Java looks at a table, at a matrix, right? Rows and columns, it looks at it saying, this is an array, and each element of that first array is itself an array. So here's an array, here's another array. Each row, if you will, is represented by its own array, right, in memory. And I have this extra array that serves me to index the rows. Okay? So, once you understand that, then you see that I could go completely crazy here. I could say int superdata, okay? And this is what, like 5 dimension? So one-dimensional array, they are vectors. Two-dimensional array, they are matrices, okay? Three-dimensional arrays, yes, people use that actually for like 3D coordinates, stuff like that. Four-dimensional arrays, yes, your favorite GPU is crunching numbers with four-dimensional arrays all the time, because when you represent those polygons, you represent them as quaternion, you are going to represent them as four-dimensional arrays. There's one extra dimension, and if I was 25 years younger, I would even remember what and why we have that extra dimension, but now I would have to look it up. So I'm going to shut up at this point and move on to another topic. All right, so, but the bottom line is that up to 4 dimension, concrete application, we can kind of like use our intuition. If I tell you I want to declare an array that has 27 dimensions, there has to be a limit in Java, but I don't know, never reached it. If I say I want an array of 27 dimensions, I don't even know how to call that first. And second, if I try to visualize what I'm doing there, it's going to be, I'm going to trade softly, okay? I'm going to walk carefully through that problem because I don't want to mess up, increment at one dimension instead of the other. This is a source of bug here. So, but we're not going to go that far. We are going to stay at pretty much two-dimensional arrays here. Why are we using two-dimensional array name parameters? Because I want to store in a way that is easy to edit, and modify. I want to store the following information. The first time I call my method, I want to call it with 10 and 20. The second time, I want to call it with 20 and 10. So the index, right, like let's look at it in terms of columns. The columns each represent a different call to the method. And for each column, the first row is the first parameter, the second row is the second parameter I want to pass. And then I have another one-dimensional array this time, outcomes, which is going to be pretty much what I expect the method to return. So when I pass to the method 10 and 20 as parameters, I expect it to return 20. Well, that makes sense because 20 is the biggest of the two. So there you go. We have our logic here, okay? So once you understand that, we were talking about messing around, with, for example, 0. So I'm adding a 0 here and 10, and then maybe 0 and minus 10, okay? So I can very easily add some more tests as long as here I say that the smallest between 0 and 10 is still 0, and the smallest between 0 and minus 10 is minus 10. And yes, it's very easy to mess things up, to forget a comma, to add one more test, then you have results, or like the number of, the number of elements here in this array is greater or lesser than the number of elements in this array, whereas they should be exactly the same. So be careful when you do those kind of edits, okay? Do them one at a time, don't do what I just did. But the bottom line is that just by understanding the concept of two-dimensional array, without even going any further, and understanding that this is what we do in those the test main method, right? We declare multi-dimensional array that represent all the tests we're going to run, then you are going to be able to edit and modify as you want. For example, if I run it here, it's going to be hard to spot, but there's going to be two additional tests. There we go. 0 and 10 succeeded again. Lock, new block. And 0 minus 10 failed as well because my implementation is still not doing anything, okay? So, to finish up for today, how do we run those tests now that we have a data structure, a set of arrays that we have organized in a certain manner so that they represent the parameters and the result, okay? How do I run those tests? I display testing your method, and then I say if the parameter at index 0. So parameters index 0, that means the first row. So if the first row has a length that is different than the length of outcome, or the second has a length different than the length of outcome, etc., I'm pretty much doing a sanity check here. If I added too many elements in one of the dimension, one of the row, and I didn't update the other one, the program is attempting to detect it, and if it detects it, it displays all tables must have the same number of tests, and then exit system.exit with a number between parentheses. Just use -1 for now. That's going to cause your entire application to shut down. So now we say major fatal error, you edited the code and now it doesn't make sense anymore. I bail out of it. In my case, it didn't crash because we were lucky that I added 2 in each of the array, in each of the dimension, right? So it didn't do that, but instead it went to the next step, which is a for loop. For test equals 0, that's going to be the number of the test. Test equals 0, test lesser than outcomes.length. Well, the number of outcomes that I expect tells me the number of tests there are going to be. Is that, correlated, that trivial? So I'm going to use that to iterate and repeat the same job n times, with n being the number of tests that you put in those arrays. And then test plus plus, I increment by 1 every time. The parameter x is going to be found at parameters index 0, index test. So parameters index 0, that's going to give me the first row. Index test inside of it, that's going to look up that array that contains all the data for the first row, and is going to find the one that correspond to the index test. So since I go test equals 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, I'm considering all of the test values one after the other for x. Then I do the same for y. Now I call the method with x and y, and I record the result in a variable called observe, for example. And then I display my stuff on the screen. If test, so this is a test number test, so I use this index here. With parameters x and y, I specify what are the values that I'm calling your method with, and then I display either succeeded or failed. I could have used the if statement here instead of line 47. Line 47 is using something called a ternary conditional operator. Does it really matter? No. When you write code, use what you know. So use the if statement here to say if outcomes of test is the same as observed, if what I got from the method when I called it is the same than what I put in my table as being the result I expect, then I display succeeded, otherwise I display failed. And I loop, and if I have 1,000,000 tests, it's the same price. Okay, I don't have to do much more work except enter one by one painfully. That's still a lot of work. But anyway, my point is that all the tests are being applied automatically. I don't have to sit down in front of my computer with a piece of paper that tells me, well, first you will enter 0 and 10, and you will expect to see a 0. Then you will enter 10 and 0, and you will also expect to see a 0. And do this by interacting with the program by hand every single time I modify something. So I told you one lecture ago, I told you that you needed to test all the time. It's true. If you have to test by hand, it's going to be very painful. Okay, so we are going to try to avoid testing by hand too much. But what we are going to do is we are going to do a mix of testing by hand while we are developing, and then at some point we are going to start writing some code like this that's going to kind of help us reapply, do our what I call the regression testing, reapply all the tests that we came up with until now, like in a few seconds, so that we may just look at the listing and pay attention only to the ones that failed. And generally speaking, most test software is not even going to display to you anything when you pass a test. The only thing that really matters is show me all the tests that failed. So I would not even display when the test is succeeded. That would make it even easier to work with. All right, that's it for today. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you for your attention. I will pause the Panopto video. Hopefully it's the audio is okay. And let me know, give me feedback if it's not working or you cannot use it, for those of you who are trying to use it.